Welcome to Game. We are your home for exceptional adventures. I am the Game Master, and in today's video, we're going to look at the best PlayStation 2 games of all time. If you're interested in taking a look at some of our other media-based projects, you can check us out over at aspireintegratedmedia.com. Now, first off, a little bit about the PlayStation 2. As the successor to the first PlayStation, the PlayStation 2 had a lot to live up to. And not only did it live up to the impressive standards the PS1 had set previously, it ended up exceeding them. The PS2 was released in the year 2000 and is the best-selling video game console of all time. Over 3,800 games have been released for the PlayStation 2, with over 1.5 billion copies sold. The console sold until 2013, when Sony finally announced it would no longer manufacture the consoles. The PS2 has many classic games from its long life, and today we're going to look at the best of these. So here's our list. First up, we have Final Fantasy X. And like previous games in the series, Final Fantasy X is presented in a third-person perspective, with players directly navigating the main character, Tidus, around the world to interact with objects and people. Unlike previous games, however, the world and town maps have been fully integrated, with terrain outside of cities rendered to scale. As you explore the world, you'll randomly encounter enemies, and when an enemy is encountered, the environment switches to a turn-based battle area where characters and enemies await their turn to attack. The gameplay in Final Fantasy X differs a bit from previous Final Fantasy games, such as it has a different map, travel system, and more. In Final Fantasy X, almost all the locations are essentially continuous and never fade out to a world map. Regional connections are mostly linear, forming a single path through the game's locations, though an airship does become available late in the game, giving the player the ability to navigate the world of Spirit faster. Like previous games in the series, Final Fantasy X features numerous minigames, and most notably, the fictional underwater sport Blitzball. This game is an excellent stroll through memory lane and comfortably sits at number 10 on this list. Next, we have Shadow of the Colossus. And Shadow is a game that changed how we both see and play RPGs today. From its beautiful open world to the story that intertwines all of your progress over the course of the game, this game is a defining moment in gaming. It serves as a breathtaking journey through ancient lands to seek out gigantic beasts and destroy them in order to save your princess. Armed with only a sword and a bow, you'll explore the spacious lands and unearth each Colossus, presenting a unique challenge to test your wits, determination, and skill. The modern remake by Blueprint Games is a visual masterpiece, enabling gamers who may have missed out on this wonderful game a chance to try it themselves. Next, we have Devil May Cry 3. And Devil May Cry 3 is the third in a series of games that has seen its share of ups and downs. However, its third outing to this day remains one of its best. It was widely praised by critics, hailing it as a return to form for the series after the disappointing Devil May Cry 2. Yet it did receive some criticisms for its high level of difficulty in the North American release. Set a decade before the events of the first Devil May Cry in an enchanted tower, the story centers on the dysfunctional relationship between Dante and his brother Virgil. The game introduces combat mechanics with an emphasis on combos and fast-paced action. The story is told primarily in cutscenes using the game's engine, and some even being pre-rendered. The gameplay in Devil May Cry 3 consists of levels in which players battle enemies, carry out platforming tasks, and solve puzzles to progress through the story. The player's performance in each mission is graded, and grades are based on time taken to complete a mission, the number of red orbs you've gathered, stylish combat, item usage, and damage to enemies. Devil May Cry 3 is one of the best focused action games to this day to play. Next we have Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And now the Grand Theft Auto series has been in the spotlight since its inception. From its ultra-violent approach to gaming to its treatment of NPCs, it's garnered controversy. Nevertheless, it's remained one of the most popular games of all times. San Andreas is no exception, considered by many reviewers to be the best. It has an amazing story, soundtrack, and voice acting at a time when said combo was rare. The game features references to many real-life elements of the world, such as its cities, regions, and landmarks, with its plot heavily based on several real-life events in LA in the early 1990s, including the rivalry between real-life street gangs, the crack epidemic of the 1980s and early 1990s, the LAPD scandal, and the 1992 LA riots. Unlike its predecessor, San Andreas introduced gameplay elements that were incorporated in later games, including RPG-style mechanics, customization options with both clothing and vehicle appearances, a vast array of activities and mini-games, and the inclusion of gambling. Definitely keep this game away from your kids, but it's an amazing game that gives freedom rarely seen in this industry. Next we have Resident Evil 4. And Resident Evil 4 is practically a perfect video game. British publication Edge magazine once named it the second greatest video game ever made. It's the title that popularized the over-the-shoulder camera perspective. All games today that move the camera a little behind and to the right of your player character owe a debt to Resident Evil 4. Beyond just the camera angle, the game raised the bar in action pacing. Resident Evil 4's first 5 minutes offer one of the most striking first impressions a game has ever made, mobbing you with angry villagers, all communicating with each other, wielding tools like pitchforks and chainsaws, and opening doors and propping up ladders. The raw confidence in its action systems, enemies, and mechanics inspired a generation of action game directors who would then go on to lead their titles with similarly panicked introductions. In Resident Evil 4, you never knew what to expect, and the game never lets off the pedal. It's now accessible in VR to further heighten the action-packed tension the game provides. At number 6, we have Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, a game that has gone on to spawn multiple sequels, reboots, a movie, and the Assassin's Creed series. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time is one of the best in this series. It's been listed by many as one of the greatest games of all times, and for good reason. The game follows the prince whose father sacks an ancient city at the instigation of a traitorous vizier. During the attack, the prince obtains an artifact called the Dagger of Time, while his father's army captures an hourglass containing the mysterious Sands of Time. The vizier then tricks the prince into releasing the sands, transforming the people of Azad into savage monsters under his control. Together with Farah, a young princess who knows the power of the sands, the prince works to correct his mistake and foil the vizier's evil plans. The gameplay revolves around the prince's platforming abilities, broken up by fights with the creatures created by the sands. Key mechanic in the game is using the dagger to rewind time if the prince makes a mistake platforming, and using it to kill and freeze enemies. The game is challenging at every step, requiring you to think things through, but also merciful enough to grant you a second chance upon failure. Next we have God of War 2, and God of War 2 is one of the best sequels of all time. It sets the standard of how to up the pace from the first game and keep players not only interested but engaged in the new game. This game is based upon Greek mythology and set in ancient Greece with vengeance as its central motif. The protagonist Kratos is the new god of war who killed the former Ares. Kratos is then betrayed by Zeus, who strips him of his godhood and kills him. He's then dragged to the underworld and saved by the Titan Gaia, who instructs him to find the Sisters of Fate as they can allow him to travel back in time, avert his betrayal, and take revenge on Zeus. The gameplay is similar to the previous installment, as it focuses on combo-based combat, which is achieved through the player's main weapon. It features quick time events that require players to quickly complete various controller actions to defeat stronger enemies and bosses. The player can use up to 4 magical attacks and a power enhancing ability as alternative combat options. The game also features puzzle and platforming elements. Compared to its predecessor, God of War 2 features improved puzzles and 4 times as many bosses. With its new reboot, having Kratos taking on Norse mythology, there's no end in sight for this amazing series. Why Kingdom Hearts 2 is the best game of the franchise. One of the standout features in Kingdom Hearts 2 is its improved combat. The first game, players can upgrade Sora's moves as he ventures to different worlds. While they do help him get faster and more agile, it pales in comparison to what's possible in the sequel. Now that Sora's a bit older and more skilled, he can take on the Heartless with more speed and ferocity. This is showcased through many moves that help him defy gravity and mix his magic with his slashes. This is a game that set up an entire decade of storytelling in which these characters have developed even further. By never sacrificing its own narrative integrity, Kingdom Hearts 2 can truly be called the best Kingdom Hearts game. Soul Calibur 2 is next, and it is a fighting game developed and published by Namco, and it's the third in the Soul Calibur series. Soul Calibur is the name of the Holy Sword, created to battle the evil sword Soul Edge, which the game's storyline revolves around. Compared to the original game, Soul Calibur 2 boasts improved graphics, and it introduces new characters, stages, and music. It's also the first game in the series to include great characters from other series such as Link from the Legend of Zelda series and Spawn. The gameplay, which includes side steps, blocking, parrying, and guard-breaking moves, are all there to increase the strategic arsenal players have. Battles revolve around making the right decisions to catch the other player off guard through either defensive or offensive means. The opponent isn't the only thing to watch out for, however, as the stages can be just as deadly. Almost every arena is precariously perched above a bottomless pit, and if a fighter is knocked off, it counts as an instant kill. The skill ceiling can reach quite high, but it's quite rewarding for those willing to climb it. Soul Calibur has continued on and still remains a staple in the professional fighting tournament scene across the world. At number 10, we have Persona 4, and it blends traditional RPG gameplay with simulation elements. The player controls the game's protagonist, a teenage boy who is named by the player, who comes to the town of Inaba for a year. Gameplay is divided between the real world, where the protagonist carries out his daily life, and the mysterious TV world, where various dungeons filled with monsters await. With the exception of scripted events such as plot progression or special events, players can choose to spend their day how they like. Whether it's participating in real-world activities such as joining school clubs, taking part-time jobs, or players can choose to explore the TV world's dungeons to gain experience and items. Days are broken up into various times of day, the most frequently recurring being after-school daytime and evening, with most activities causing time to move on. Certain activities are limited depending on the time of day, days of the week, and the weather, with most evening activities unavailable if the player visits the TV world that day. Furthermore, some activities and dialogue choices may be limited by the protagonist's attributes. The main focus of the game revolves around personas, avatars projected from one's inner self that resemble mythological figures and represent the facades worn by individuals to face life's hardships. Each persona possesses its own skills as well as strengths and weaknesses to certain attributes. It has an amazing story of life, hardships, and friendships. It's a must-play for any gamer looking for a great, immersive story. And there you have it. These are our top 10 PlayStation 2 games. And as always, we hope that you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified every time we release a new video here on Game. Have an amazing day, and remember to have an exceptional adventure today, whether it's in your game or more importantly in your life. Enjoy and have fun.